The mare's left foreleg buckled just enough that only someone watching closely would catch it, and Olivia Garrett caught it half a second too late. She stood in the dusty market yard on the edge of Abilene, Kansas, the June heat pressing down like a wool blanket, her travel money already counted into the palm of a man whose smile showed too many teeth. The horse trader wore a vest that might once have been expensive, his hat cocked at an angle that suggested he thought himself charming. Behind her, wagons creaked past on their way to the stockyards, cattle lowing in the distance, the whole town smelling of livestock and possibility. It was 1871, and Abilene stood at the junction of everything moving west, which meant it also stood at the junction of everyone trying to make a dollar off that movement. "She's sound as a church bell," the trader was saying, pocketing her coins with practiced ease. "Rode her myself just yesterday. You will not find a gentler mare between here and Denver." Olivia watched the horse shift its weight again, that left leg hanging just slightly wrong. Her stomach dropped. She had spent the last of her traveling funds, the money her aunt had left her, the money that was supposed to get her to the homestead claim waiting 200 miles northwest. The deadline to file her proof of intent sat 3 weeks away, and without a horse, she would never reach the land office in time. "Wait," she said, but the trader was already turning away, already scanning the yard for his next transaction. A voice drifted from somewhere to her left, lazy and amused. "That is a shame." Olivia turned. A man sat on the top rail of the corral fence, one boot hooked over the lower rung, his hat tipped back far enough to show sun-lightened hair and a face that looked accustomed to smiling. He could not have been much older than she was, perhaps 24 to her 22, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows and his vest hanging open in the heat. He had been whittling something, a piece of wood now tucked into his pocket, his knife folded away. "Excuse me," Olivia said. "That horse." He nodded toward the mare, who stood with her hip cocked, still favoring that left foreleg. "She is lame. You can see it in how she stands. Probably threw a shoe bad a week ago and the hoof is still tender, or maybe she has got some heat in the joint. Either way, that fellow just sold you a horse that cannot carry you 10 miles without coming up sore." Heat flooded Olivia's face, part anger and part humiliation. "I can see that now, thank you." "Can you?" The cowboy hopped down from the fence with an easy grace, landing light in his worn boots. Up close, he had gray eyes that held more intelligence than his drawling voice suggested, and a mouth that quirked at one corner like he found the whole world gently amusing. "Then, why did you hand over your money?" "Because I needed a horse." Olivia heard her voice climb and forced it level again. She would not cry in a stockyard in front of a stranger, no matter how neatly she had been cheated. "I have a claim to reach, and the land office will not hold it past the filing deadline." "Where is the claim?" "North of Hayes, Smoky Hill Country," he whistled low. "That is a ride." "You are traveling alone." It was none of his business, but something in his tone made it a genuine question rather than a judgment. Olivia lifted her chin. "I am. And now I have a lame horse and no money to buy another, so if you will excuse me, I need to figure out what to do next." She expected him to tip his hat and wander off. Instead, his grin widened. "What if I could get your money back? The trader is already gone." "Oh, he is still around." The cowboy glanced across the yard to where the too smooth man in the expensive vest was running his hands down the legs of another horse, another mark hovering nearby. "Fellows like Walter Finch do not leave Abilene until they have worked the whole market. He will be here until sundown at least." "You know him." "I know his type." Something harder flickered behind the easy smile there and gone again. "Tell me, miss, how much did you pay for that fine lame mare?" $40. He let out another low whistle. 40. That is steep for a horse that cannot walk straight. All right, here is what we are going to do. You are going to lead that mare over to where Finch is working his next deal, and I am going to have a conversation with him about the quality of his stock. By the time we are done, he is going to buy that horse back from you, and he is going to pay you $80 for the privilege. Olivia stared at him. That is impossible. It is not. But I am going to need you to trust me, and I am going to need you to follow my lead when the moment comes. Can you do that? She should have said no. She should have walked away from this stranger with his easy grin and his impossible promises. Should have figured out her own solution the way she had figured out every other problem since her aunt died, and left her with nothing but a land claim and a determination to make something of herself. But $40 was gone, and 3 weeks would pass whether she had a sound horse or not, and sometimes desperation looked like a cowboy leaning against a fence rail with mischief in his eyes. "What do I call you?" she asked. "Yates Parker. And you?" "Olivia Garrett." "Well then, Miss Garrett." Yates pushed off from the fence and offered his arm like they were heading into a church social instead of a confrontation with a horse cheat. "Let us go recover your investment." They crossed the yard slowly, Olivia leading the lame mare, Yates strolling beside her like he had all the time in the world. The mare limped along, her gait more obviously uneven now that Olivia knew to watch for it. How had she missed it before? But she knew how. She had been tired from 2 weeks of travel, anxious about the deadline, and Walter Finch had a smooth voice and quick hands, and he had kept her attention on the mare's gentle eye and glossy coat instead of her legs. Finch glanced up as they approached, and Olivia saw the flash of recognition, then annoyance, cross his face. He was in the middle of showing a solid-looking bay gelding to a rancher in dusty work clothes, and he clearly did not appreciate the interruption. "Folks," he said, nodding without warmth. "I am with a customer." "This will only take a minute," Yates said, his voice still carrying that lazy, friendly drawl. He did not move into Finch's space, did not make any aggressive motion, just stood there smiling. "I wanted to talk to you about the mare you just sold Miss Garrett here." "The one that is lame." The rancher looked up with interest. Finch's jaw tightened. "That mare is perfectly sound. I told the lady to walk her gentle for the first day, that is all. New rider, new horse, they need time to get acquainted." "Is that so?" Yates tilted his head. "Because it looks to me like she is favoring that left foreleg pretty significant. Could be a stone bruise, could be a bowed tendon, hard to say. But I am sure a reputable horseman like yourself would want to make sure Miss Garrett here did not ride out of Abilene on an unsound animal. People talk, you know. Word gets around about traders who sell lame horses to women traveling alone." A few other men had started to drift over, drawn by the conversation. The market was crowded with drovers and ranchers, men waiting for the afternoon train, men with time to kill and an appreciation for drama. Yates did not look at them, kept his attention on Finch, but Olivia could feel the shift in the air, the way an audience changed everything. Finch's smile had gone thin. "Now listen here, I run an honest business. If the lady has a complaint, she can take it up with the stock association, but I do not give refunds just because a buyer gets nervous after the deal is done." "Oh, I do not think Miss Garrett wants a refund," Yates said. "That would not be fair to you, seeing as how you have lost the opportunity to sell that mare to someone else. No, I think the right thing, the gentlemanly thing, would be for you to buy the mare back. Show everyone here that you stand behind your stock. Buy her back." Finch barked a laugh. "Why would I do that?" "Because," Yates said, and his voice stayed easy but something in his eyes went sharp. "You have got a reputation to maintain, and there are about 15 fellows standing here listening right now. Every one of them is going to remember whether you made this right or whether you sold a lame horse to a woman and then refused to own up to it. Now, I am not saying you cheated Miss Garrett on purpose. Maybe you just did not notice the mare was sore. Could happen to anyone. But now that it has been pointed out, well, a man of integrity would want to fix the situation. The silence stretched. Olivia could hear the creak of wagon wheels, the distant hammer of the railroad construction, her own heartbeat loud in her ears. The men watching shifted and murmured, and she saw Finch's calculation written clear on his face. The cost of backing down versus the cost of being known as a cheat in a town where reputation meant business. "Fine," he said finally, biting off the word. "I will buy the mare back. $40. "80, Yates said calmly. "80, that is robbery, is it? Let us see." Yates turned to the watching crowd, his voice still friendly, still easy. "Any of you fellows want to buy a lame mare for $40? Silence. "No, how about 30? More silence. 20. A few men chuckled. Yates turned back to Finch, his expression mild. "Looks like nobody else wants to buy your lame horse, Walter. And Miss Garrett here is out $40 plus the time it is going to take her to find another mount. Plus she might miss her claim deadline because of this mess. $80 seems fair for the inconvenience. Unless you would rather we all keep talking about how you conduct business." Finch looked like he wanted to spit, but the crowd was nodding now, a few men calling out agreement. The rancher who had been looking at the bay gelding had stepped back, his interest clearly cooled. Finch was losing customers with every second that passed. $80, he said through his teeth. He dug into his vest pocket and pulled out a handful of coins and bills, counting them with sharp, angry movements. "This is extortion. This is commerce," Yates said cheerfully. He took the money and handed it to Olivia, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "Pleasure doing business with you, Walter. You take care now." He steered Olivia away before Finch could respond, one hand light on her elbow, the lame mare trailing behind them. They did not stop until they were on the far side of the market, near the water troughs where the noise of the crowd faded to a murmur. Only then did Yates let go of her arm and turn to face her, that grin back in full force. "There you go, Miss Garrett. $80, and a horse that Walter Finch is going to have to deal with himself." Olivia looked down at the money in her hand, still warm from Finch's pocket. $80, twice what she had paid, which meant she could afford a sound horse and still have money left for supplies. Her throat felt tight. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Shame," Yates said simply. "Men like Finch care more about their reputation than their conscience. You make it public, make it so everyone is watching, and suddenly they find a little bit of integrity. The trick is making them think it was their idea to do the right thing. You made him think buying the mare back for double was his idea. I made it so the alternative was worse. That is not quite the same thing, but it gets the job done." He leaned against the water trough, pulling out his whittling again, the little piece of wood taking shape under his knife. It looked like it might be a horse, the lines rough but recognizable. "So, you have got your money back and then some. What now?" "Now I buy a sound horse and ride north before the deadline." Olivia hesitated. "Thank you. I do not know what I would have done without your help. You would have figured something out. You have got that look about you." "What look?" "The stubborn kind." But his smile took any sting from the words. "Where are you planning to buy this sound horse?" "I suppose back in the market, though I am not sure I trust my judgment anymore." "Your judgment was fine. Finch is just practiced at misdirection. But if you want, I know a rancher on the edge of town who has got some good stock, fair prices, and no interest in cheating anyone. I could introduce you." Olivia studied him. Yates Parker, with his easy manner and his clever tongue and his eyes that suggested he saw more than he let on. He had just recovered her money through nothing but words and well-played social pressure, had done it almost casually, like righting wrongs was something he did between breakfast and lunch on an ordinary Thursday. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Let us just say I do not like men who cheat women out of their traveling money. The West is hard enough without that kind of meanness." There was a story there, Olivia thought, something personal behind the lazy grin. But before she could ask, Yates was already pushing off from the trough, tucking his whittling away. "Come on," he said. "The ranch is about a mile out. We can walk it before the heat gets too bad and old Samuel keeps his horses in good shape. You will find something that will get you to Hayes, I promise." They left the market behind, following a rutted road that led away from the stockyards and the railroad noise. The mare limped along behind them, Yates having taken her lead rope without asking. The day was climbing toward noon, the sky a hard, bright blue overhead, and grasshoppers whirred up from the dry grass at the roadside. Abilene sprawled behind them, all temporary buildings and big ambitions, the kind of town that might be gone in 10 years or might become something permanent. It was impossible to say which. "So you have got a homestead claim," Yates said after a while. "That is brave, heading out alone. It is necessary. My aunt left me the claim when she died, but she had not proved it up yet. If I do not file the proof of intent and meet the residency requirements, I lose it. No other family, no." Olivia kept her eyes on the road ahead. "My parents died when I was young. My aunt raised me, taught me to read and figure and manage a household. She always talked about going west, claiming land, building something of our own. She filed the claim 2 years ago, but she got sick before she could travel out to it. I am sorry. So am I, but I have the claim now and I am going to prove it up the way she wanted. 200 acres of good grassland, a creek running through the southern parcel, and a stand of cottonwood that can be milled for lumber. That is what the surveyor's report said anyway. I have not seen it yet. You are riding 200 miles to land you have never seen. Do you have a better suggestion?" Yates laughed. "No, madam. I think it is the best kind of gamble, actually. The whole West is full of people betting on places they have never been. Most of them do not have the sense to read a surveyor's report first." They walked in silence for a bit, the sun pressing down, the road empty except for a distant wagon raising dust on the horizon. Olivia found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. There was something unthreatening about Yates, a kind of comfortable ease that made the mile pass quickly. He pointed out a hawk circling overhead, mentioned that the dry spell meant the river was running low, asked about her route north with the interest of someone who knew the country. "You have traveled the Smoky Hill Road?" Olivia asked. "I have been up that way, yes. It is not a bad ride if you follow the stage route and do not try to cut across country. There are a few towns where you can resupply, and the stage stations will usually let you water your horse and sleep in the barn if you are polite about it. You seem to know a lot about traveling." "I have been doing it for a while." Something shifted in his tone, a door closing gently. "Here we are." The ranch, when they reached it, was a modest spread with a solid barn and a corral holding half a dozen horses. An older man with a gray beard and sun-weathered skin came out to meet them, his face lighting up when he saw Yates. "Yates Parker, as I live and breathe." "I thought you had drifted down to Texas." "I got as far as Wichita and decided I missed Kansas too much," Yates said, shaking the man's hand. "Samuel, this is Miss Olivia Garrett. She needs a sound horse for a long ride north, and I figured you could set her up with something trustworthy. She has already had one run-in with Walter Finch today, so let us make sure the next horse she buys is actually worth the money." Samuel spat into the dust. "Walter Finch is a snake. "What did he sell you, miss?" "A lame mare for $40. "And Yates got him to buy it back for 80, Yates added, grinning. Samuel barked a laugh. "I would have paid money to see Walter's face during that conversation. All right, let us find you a horse. I have got a roan gelding that is steady as a rock and a paint mare with some spirit but good legs. Come take a look." An hour later, Olivia was the owner of the roan gelding, a patient animal with kind eyes and a ground-eating walk that would make the miles to Hayes less daunting. Samuel had asked $50 and accepted $45 after Olivia pointed out a minor saddle sore that needed attention, and he had thrown in a worn but serviceable saddle and bridle for an extra $10. She felt good about the purchase, felt like she had finally done something right after the disaster of the morning. Yates had drifted off to lean against the barn while she and Samuel negotiated, whittling again, but he looked up when she led the roan out of the corral. "That is a good horse," he said. "He will get you where you are going, thanks to you." Olivia hesitated. "Can I buy you lunch? It is the least I can do after what you did in the market." "You do not owe me anything, I know, but I would like to." Yates studied her for a moment, then his grin came back. "All right, Miss Garrett, I will never turn down a free meal." They rode back into Abilene together, Olivia on her new roan and Yates on a rangy buckskin he had left stabled at Samuel's place. The gelding moved smooth and sound beneath her, no hitch in his stride, and the relief of it made her almost giddy. She had a good horse, money in her pocket, and 3 weeks to reach her claim. It was going to be all right. The restaurant Yates chose was a simple place near the railroad depot, the kind of establishment that served drovers and travelers and did not ask questions. They ordered beef stew and fresh bread, coffee that was more bitter than good but hot and strong. Olivia realized she had not eaten since breakfast, and she tore into the food with enthusiasm that probably was not very ladylike, but she did not care. "You were hungry," Yates observed. "I have been rationing my supplies. I was not sure how long the money would need to last. And now you have got a cushion, thanks to Walter Finch's involuntary generosity." Yates broke his bread apart, using it to soak up the stew. "So, 200 miles to Smoky Hill country. When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning, first light. I have already lost too much time." "You are cutting it close, 3 weeks to cover that distance and file your paperwork." "I know, but I will make it." Olivia met his eyes. "I have to." "I believe you." He said it simply, like it was a fact rather than encouragement. "You have got that stubborn look, remember." They ate in companionable silence for a while. The restaurant filled and emptied around them, drovers coming in for quick meals, a few women in traveling clothes, the constant background noise of a cattle town in the height of the season. Through the window, Olivia could see the railroad platform, the waiting trains, the endless flow of people moving west. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Why did you help me? The real reason, not the one about not liking cheats." Yates set down his spoon, his expression going thoughtful. For a moment, Olivia thought he would deflect again, turn it into a joke or change the subject. But then he sighed. "6 years ago, my family had a ranch down in Sedgwick County," he said quietly. "Not big, but enough to make a living. My father died when I was 16, and my mother ran the place with me and my younger sister. We did all right for a few years. Then a man came through, said he was a land agent, said there was a problem with our deed and we needed to pay a fee to refile it. My mother did not know any better. She paid him everything we had saved and he disappeared. Turned out he was a con man and the deed was fine all along. But without the savings, we could not make it through a bad winter. We lost the ranch. My mother died the next spring, and my sister went to live with our aunt in Missouri." Olivia's chest tightened. "Yates, I am so sorry." It was a long time ago, but his voice carried the weight of it still. After that, I just drifted, worked cattle drives, did some cowboying, picked up jobs where I could, never stayed anywhere long. I keep telling myself I am going to save up, buy some land, start over, but every time I get close, I find a reason to move on. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. I think I am afraid it will happen again, afraid I will build something and someone will take it away. It is easier to keep moving, you know. Nothing to lose if you do not have anything in the first place. Olivia understood that. She had felt it herself after her aunt died, the temptation to let the claim go, to stay in St. Louis where things were familiar and safe. But safety was not the same thing as living, and she had decided her aunt's dream was worth the risk. When I saw Finch working his game on you, Yates continued, I just thought, here is another cheat trying to take advantage of someone who is just trying to build a life. And I have seen too many of those to walk away from it, so I helped. That is the whole story. It is a good story, Olivia said. Sad but good. You did a kind thing today, Yates Parker. Maybe you do not give yourself enough credit for the kind of man you are. He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them, a recognition that was not quite attraction but might become it, given time. Then he smiled, breaking the moment. Maybe. Or maybe I just do not like seeing a woman get cheated in a horse market. Either way, you have got your gelding and your money, and tomorrow you ride north. That is a happy ending, Miss Garrett. I suppose it is. But it did not feel like an ending, Olivia thought. It felt like something just starting. They finished their meal and walked out into the afternoon heat. Yates helped her purchase supplies at the mercantile, pointing out which jerky would keep longest and which canteen design would not leak. He introduced her to the owner of a boarding house, who rented her a clean room for the night at a fair price. And through it all, he kept up a steady stream of conversation, stories about the trail north, advice about which towns to avoid and which stage stations had the friendliest managers. By the time the sun started dropping toward the horizon, Olivia realized she had spent the entire day with Yates Parker, and it had been the most pleasant day she had experienced since leaving St. Louis. They stood outside the boarding house as the shadows lengthened, the air finally losing some of its brutal heat. Olivia's roan was stabled at the livery down the street, her supplies packed and ready. In the morning, she would ride out, alone again, and this strange day would fade into memory. Thank you, she said, for everything. I do not know how to repay you. You do not need to. Yates tipped his hat, his grin back in place. Just get to your claim on time and prove it up. Build something good, that will be payment enough. What will you do? What I always do, drift. Maybe find work on a ranch for the summer. Maybe sign on for a cattle drive. I will figure it out. Olivia wanted to say something more, wanted to ask him to come with her or to at least write to her once she was settled. But they had known each other for less than a day, and she had no right to ask anything of him. He had already given her more than she could have expected. Safe travels, Yates Parker, she said. Safe travels, Olivia Garrett. I hope that land is everything your aunt dreamed it would be. He turned and walked away, his buckskin waiting at the hitching post down the street. Olivia watched him mount up and ride out of town, heading west toward the setting sun, and tried to ignore the small, hollow feeling in her chest that felt absurdly like disappointment. She went inside, climbed the stairs to her rented room, and lay awake far longer than she should have, thinking about gray eyes and an easy grin, and a man who helped strangers because he knew what it felt like to be cheated. The next morning dawned clear and already warm. Olivia was up before the sun, eating a quick breakfast of biscuits and coffee at the boarding house, checking her supplies one last time. The roan gelding was rested and ready when she collected him from the livery, and by the time the sun cleared the horizon, she was riding north out of Abilene, the town falling away behind her. The smoky hill road stretched ahead, rutted and dusty and long. Olivia settled into the rhythm of travel, letting the roan set his own pace, stopping to rest in the heat of midday and pushing on in the cooler hours of morning and evening. The first day passed uneventfully. She covered nearly 30 miles, camped at a stage station that night, and woke to do it again. The second day brought clouds on the horizon but no rain. The third day brought a family in a wagon, traveling west, and Olivia rode alongside them for a few hours, grateful for the company. The fourth day brought a thunderstorm that soaked her through but broke the heat, and she spent the night in a tiny town called Carlton, drying her clothes by a boarding house fire. By the end of the first week, she had covered 140 miles and was starting to feel the ache in muscles she had not known existed. The roan was holding up well, though, and her supplies were still adequate. She was going to make it. And then, on the 8th day, as she approached a stage station called Cedar Point, she saw a familiar buckskin horse tied outside. Her heart did a strange little jump. She told herself not to be ridiculous, that there were plenty of buckskin horses in Kansas, that it could not possibly be Yates Parker. But when she dismounted and walked into the stage station to buy water, there he was, sitting at a rough wooden table with a cup of coffee, his hat on the bench beside him. He looked up when she entered, and his face split into that easy grin. "Well, Miss Garrett," he said, "fancy meeting you here." Olivia stared at him. "What are you doing here, resting my horse? Same as you, I would imagine." He gestured to the empty bench across from him. "You have made good time. 8 days to cover 140 miles, that is not bad at all. How did you know how far I have come?" "I have been following the same road. Saw your tracks a few days back, figured I would catch up eventually." He said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You have been following me, not following, traveling the same direction. There is a difference." Olivia sat down, her mind spinning. "Why?" Yates was quiet for a moment, spinning his coffee cup between his palms. When he looked up, his expression had lost some of its easy humor. "Honestly, I got about 10 miles west of Abilene and realized I did not want to drift anymore. Not right then, anyway. And I kept thinking about what you said, about giving myself credit, and about the fact that you are riding 200 miles alone to claim land you have never seen, and that is either brave or crazy, and I could not decide which. So I turned around and followed the smoky hill road, and here we are." "Here we are," Olivia echoed. Her chest felt tight again, but in a different way than before. "Yates, you do not need to look after me. I can make it on my own." "I know you can. That is not why I am here." He leaned forward, his eyes serious. "The truth is, I do not know why I am here. I just know that helping you with Finch felt like the first good thing I have done in a long time. The first thing that mattered. And I thought maybe, if you did not mind the company, I could ride with you the rest of the way. See you to your claim. Make sure you get there before the deadline. And after that, I do not know. Maybe I drift again. Maybe I find work in Hayes. Maybe I finally figure out what I want to do with my life." His grin flickered back. "But at least I will know I helped you build something. That counts for something, does it not?" Olivia looked at him, this man who had appeared in her life like a whirlwind and turned everything sideways. He had no obligation to her, no reason to ride hundreds of miles just to make sure she reached her claim. But he was here anyway, and the offer was written plain on his face. "I would like the company," she said quietly. "It gets lonely, riding alone." "Good." Yates sat back, his relief obvious. "Then we ride together. Partners on the trail." "Partners," Olivia agreed. They left Cedar Point an hour later, riding side by side, the road stretching ahead through the tall grass prairie. Yates kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks, telling stories about cattle drives and towns he had passed through. He was funny and self-deprecating, and surprisingly well-read for a drifting cowboy. He quoted Shakespeare and argued about politics, and admitted he had a weakness for dime novels, the more ridiculous the better. "I like stories where the hero wins," he said when Olivia teased him about it. "Real life does not always work out that way, so I appreciate fiction where things make sense and the good guys come out on top." "You are a romantic," Olivia said, delighted. "I am a realist with a hopeful streak. There is a difference." "I do not think there is." They camped that night beside a creek, the water running low but clear. Yates caught fish for their dinner, and Olivia made pan bread with the last of her flour, and they sat by the fire as the stars came out overhead. It felt comfortable in a way that should not have been possible with someone she barely knew, but Yates had a gift for putting people at ease. He asked about her life in St. Louis, about her aunt, about what she planned to do with the land once she claimed it. "I want to build a house," Olivia said. "Something solid, with real windows and a wood floor. My aunt and I always lived in rented rooms, places that never felt like ours. I want a place that belongs to me, where I can make decisions about what color to paint the walls and where to plant a garden." "That probably sounds silly." "It does not sound silly at all. It sounds like a good dream." "What about you? What is your dream?" Yates poked at the fire with a stick, sending up sparks. "I used to dream about having a ranch again. A place like my family had, with good grass and a few head of cattle, and a house with a porch where you could sit in the evening and watch the sun go down. But after we lost our place, I guess I stopped letting myself want things like that. It hurt too much." "Maybe you could start wanting things again." "Maybe." He glanced at her, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You make it sound easy." "It is not easy, but I think it is necessary. If we stop wanting things, we stop living, and that is worse than being hurt." They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the night sounds of the prairie settling around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The horses shifted and snuffled, hobbled nearby. Olivia felt more content than she had in months, maybe years. It was strange, she thought, how quickly a person could become important. A week ago, she had not known Yates Parker existed. Now she could not imagine making this journey without him. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting me." The days that followed fell into an easy pattern. They rode through the long Kansas grasslands, through country that was sometimes green and lush and sometimes parched and brown. They passed ranches and homesteads, tiny settlements and stage stations. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing the stories of their lives in a way that felt both natural and profound. Olivia learned that Yates had worked as a cowboy, a ranch hand, a teamster, and briefly as a deputy sheriff in a town so small it did not have a proper jail. He had been to Texas and Colorado and once as far as California. He was 25, 2 years older than she had guessed. His favorite food was apple pie, his favorite season was autumn, and he could not carry a tune to save his life, but he tried anyway when he thought she was not listening. Yates learned that Olivia could read Latin, that she had wanted to be a teacher before her aunt got sick, that she was terrified of snakes but too stubborn to let that stop her from camping in snake country. She had never been further west than Kansas City before this trip. She liked coffee strong and her steak rare, and she had very definite opinions about how to properly organize a bookshelf. Alphabetically by author, she insisted as they rode through an afternoon so hot the air shimmered. That is insane. By subject, obviously. Otherwise, how do you find what you want? You remember the author's name. It is not complicated. What if you do not know the author? What if you just want a book about, say, horses and you do not care who wrote it? Then you learn the authors. Honestly, Yates, this is not difficult. He laughed, shaking his head. We are going to have to agree to disagree on this one, Miss Garrett. We certainly are not. But she was smiling, and so was he, and the argument was ridiculous and perfect and exactly the kind of thing that made the long miles pass quickly. They reached the town of Russell on the 12th day, tired and dusty and still a full week from Hayes. Olivia's deadline was 9 days away, and she was starting to feel the pressure of it, the nagging worry that something would go wrong at the last minute. They stocked up on supplies, ate a hot meal at a hotel restaurant, and slept in real beds for the first time in days. In the morning, as they prepared to leave, Yates checked the roan's hooves and frowned. He is developing a crack in his right front hoof, he said. It is not bad yet, but if we push him hard, it could get worse. We need to take it easy for the next few days, let him rest more often. Olivia's stomach dropped. If we go slow, I might not make the deadline. If we go fast and he comes up lame, you definitely will not make it. Better to be cautious. He straightened, meeting her worried gaze. We will make it, Olivia, I promise, but we have to be smart about it. So they rode carefully, stopping more often, walking the horses through the hottest parts of the day. It was agonizingly slow, and Olivia found herself calculating and recalculating the remaining distance, the remaining days, trying to make the numbers work. Yates stayed calm and steady beside her, never complaining, never suggesting they turn back or give up. Tell me about your aunt, he said one afternoon, clearly trying to distract her from her worry. You said she raised you. What was she like? Olivia smiled despite her anxiety. She was stubborn and smart, and she did not take nonsense from anyone. She worked as a seamstress, made beautiful dresses for wealthy women, but she always said she was not made for cities. She wanted land and sky and room to breathe. When she filed the homestead claim, she was so happy. She talked about it constantly, planned every detail of the house she would build, the garden she would plant. And then she got sick, and it all slipped away. Except it did not. You are making it happen for her. I am trying. You are succeeding. You have already come further than most people would. You are going to reach that claim, Olivia. And when you do, you are going to build the house she dreamed about, and it is going to be everything she wanted. His certainty bolstered her. Yates had a way of making impossible things seem achievable, of turning worry into determination. By the time they camped that night, Olivia felt steadier, more confident. The numbers were tight, but they were not impossible. Not yet. On the 15th day, they reached Bunker Hill, a tiny settlement with a stage station and a general store. The roan's hoof was holding up, the crack not spreading, and they were only 50 miles from Hayes. 3 days of hard riding if they pushed, 4 if they stayed cautious. Olivia's deadline was 5 days away. We can do this, Yates said as they sat outside the stage station, eating jerky and hardtack. 50 miles in 4 days is nothing. You are going to make it with a day to spare. What if something goes wrong? Then we will deal with it. But nothing is going to go wrong, Olivia. Stop borrowing trouble. She wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But that night she lay awake in her bedroll, staring up at the stars, and whispered prayers to her aunt's memory. I am trying, she said to the darkness. I am so close. Please let me make it. The next day dawned with a wall of clouds to the northwest, dark and threatening. Yates eyed them with concern as they saddled the horses. Storm coming, he said. Could just be rain, but this time of year it could be hail or worse. We should find shelter if it gets close. We do not have time for shelter. We need to keep riding, Olivia. No, Yates, we do not have time. She heard the edge in her voice, the fear and frustration spilling over. "I have 5 days to cover 50 miles and file my paperwork. If a storm slows us down, I might not make it. I have come too far to fail now because I was too scared of some rain." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but if it gets dangerous, we stop. Your claim is not worth getting killed over." They rode into the teeth of the storm. It hit mid-morning, a deluge of rain that turned the road into a muddy river and reduced visibility to a few dozen yards. Thunder cracked overhead, and lightning split the sky, each bolt making the horses dance and shy. Olivia clung to the saddle, soaked through in minutes, determined to keep moving. Yates stayed beside her, his buckskin as steady as her roan, his presence a constant reassurance. He did not tell her to stop, did not suggest turning back. He just rode with her through the rain and the mud and the misery, mile after mile. The storm finally broke in the early afternoon, the clouds rolling east and leaving behind a washed, clean world. They stopped to wring out their clothes and check the horses, both of them shivering and exhausted. But they had covered 15 miles, even in the storm, and Olivia felt a fierce pride at that. "You are insane," Yates said, but he was grinning. "You know that, right? I prefer determined. Insane and determined are not mutually exclusive." They reached Hayes on the evening of the 17th day. The town was bigger than Olivia had expected, a real settlement with brick buildings and a railroad line, bustling with activity even as the sun set. They found a hotel, booked 2 rooms, and collapsed into hot baths and clean sheets. In the morning, Olivia would file her proof of intent at the land office. In the morning, the claim would be officially hers, and all the miles and worry and fear would finally be worth it. But tonight, as she lay in a real bed for the first time in over 2 weeks, all she could think about was Yates Parker, and what would happen once her claim was secured and he had no reason to stay. The land office opened at 8 o'clock. Olivia was there at 7:30, her paperwork clutched in hands that would not stop shaking. The surveyor's report, her aunt's original filing, the proof of her identity, all of it organized and ready. Yates stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, watching the street with a calm that she wished she could borrow. "You are going to wear a hole in that paper," he said gently. "I know. I cannot help it. It is going to be fine. You have got everything you need. You are here 3 days before the deadline, and the land office is not going to turn you away. This is the easy part, Olivia." At 8 o'clock, the clerk unlocked the door and let them inside. The land office was a small, neat space with desks and filing cabinets and maps on the walls. The clerk was a middle-aged man with spectacles and an air of competence that immediately made Olivia feel better. "How can I help you?" he asked. "I need to file a proof of intent for a homestead claim." Olivia spread her paperwork on the desk. "The original claim was filed by my aunt, Olivia Garrett, 2 years ago. She passed away before she could prove it up, and she left it to me in her will. I am here to take over the claim and meet the residency requirements." The clerk examined the papers, flipping through each page with methodical care. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. Beside her, Yates was a solid, silent presence, and she felt herself leaning slightly toward him, drawing strength from his steadiness. Finally, the clerk looked up and smiled. "Everything appears to be in order. I will file your proof of intent today, and you will need to establish residency on the claim within 60 days. After that, you will need to meet the standard requirements for proving up: 5 years of continuous residence and cultivation of at least 10 acres. Do you understand?" "Yes," Olivia said, her voice shaking with relief. "Yes, I understand. Then congratulations, Miss Garrett. The claim is officially yours." They walked out of the land office into the bright morning sun, and Olivia felt like she might float away. She had done it. 200 miles, 17 days, and she had done it. The claim was hers, the land her aunt had dreamed about, the future they had planned together. It was real. Yates was grinning at her. "I told you it would be fine." "You did." Olivia laughed, giddy with relief and exhaustion and joy. "Thank you, Yates, for everything. I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have, but I am glad I was here anyway." They stood there on the street, people flowing around them, the whole town busy with its daily life. Olivia knew she should say something more, should figure out what came next, but her mind felt blank, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had just accomplished. "So," Yates said after a moment, "what now? You have got 60 days to establish residency. That is not a lot of time to build a house and get settled." "I know. I need to get out to the claim, see what condition it is in, figure out what needs to be done. I was thinking I could hire a wagon in town, load it with supplies, and head out tomorrow." "That makes sense." Yates was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You are going to need help. Building a house, I mean, that is not a one-person job. I will hire workers in town. You could. Or—" he paused, then met her eyes. "Or I could come with you, help you build the house, get the place set up. I have done enough ranch work to know my way around construction, and I do not have anywhere else to be." Olivia's heart stumbled. "Yates, you do not have to do that. You have already done so much." "I know I do not have to. I want to." He took a breath. "The truth is, I have been thinking a lot these past few weeks about what you said in Cedar Point about wanting something again. And I realized that somewhere between Abilene and here, I started wanting something. I started wanting to see this through. To help you build your house, to see your land, to be part of something that matters. So if you will have me, I would like to stay, at least until the house is built. And after that, I do not know, but I would like to figure it out if that is all right with you." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears, the kind that came from gratitude and hope and something else she was not quite ready to name. She had been alone for so long, since her aunt died, carrying the weight of the claim and the deadline and the fear of failing by herself. The idea of not being alone anymore, of having a partner in this impossible venture, felt almost too good to be true. "I would like that," she said quietly. "I would like that very much." Yates's smile could have lit up the whole prairie. "Good. Then let us go buy a wagon and some lumber and get started. You have got a house to build, Miss Garrett, and only 60 days to do it." They spent 2 days in Hayes, purchasing supplies and organizing the logistics of establishing a homestead. Yates proved invaluable, his experience helping Olivia navigate decisions about tools and materials. They bought lumber and nails, a plow and seed, chickens in crates and a pair of goats, a cast iron stove and glass windows that cost a small fortune but Olivia insisted on having. By the time they loaded everything into a sturdy wagon pulled by a team of oxen, they had spent most of Olivia's remaining money, but they had everything they needed to start a working homestead. The ride out to the claim took a full day, following the surveyor's directions through open grassland and gentle hills. The land was beautiful in a stark, unadorned way, all sweeping sky and rolling prairie, dotted with wildflowers and the occasional stand of trees. Olivia felt her excitement building with every mile, imagining what the claim would look like, where she would build the house, how she would arrange the garden. They found the claim in the late afternoon, marked by wooden stakes driven into the ground at each corner. 200 acres of grassland, just as the surveyor's report had described, with a creek running through the southern edge and a small grove of cottonwoods clustered along the bank. The grass was tall and green from spring rains, and birds wheeled overhead, and it was the most beautiful thing Olivia had ever seen. She climbed down from the wagon and walked to the center of the claim, turning slowly to take it all in. This was hers. This land, this sky, this future. She could build anything she wanted here, create any life she could imagine. The possibilities felt endless and terrifying and perfect. Yates came to stand beside her, his gaze sweeping the landscape. "It is good land," he said quietly. "Your aunt chose well. She did." Olivia's voice was thick with emotion. "I wish she could see it. I think maybe she can." They set up camp that night beside the creek, under the cottonwoods. The sound of running water was a comfort, and the trees provided shelter from the wind. Yates built a fire while Olivia unpacked the supplies, and they ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, too tired for anything elaborate. "Tomorrow we start building," Yates said, leaning back against a cottonwood trunk. "We should mark out where you want the house first, make sure we are building in the right spot. Near the creek, I think, close enough to carry water easily, but far enough that we do not have to worry about flooding." "That makes sense. And you want the house facing south to catch the light." They discussed the details late into the night, planning the house and the garden, the barn for the animals, the well they would need to dig. Yates had done this before, Olivia realized, or at least watched it done. He knew things about construction and homesteading that she had not even thought to consider. She felt a surge of gratitude that he was here, that she did not have to figure all of this out alone. "Yates," she said as the fire burned low, "why are you really doing this?" He looked at her, firelight casting shadows across his face. "I told you I want to be part of something that matters. But why this? Why me?" He was quiet for a long time, and Olivia thought he might not answer. Then he sighed. "When I helped you in Abilene, it was the first time in 6 years that I felt like I was doing something good, something that would last beyond the moment. And when I rode away from you that first night, I felt empty in a way I had not expected, like I had just walked away from something important. So I turned around and came back, and every day since then has felt right in a way nothing has felt right for a long time." He met her eyes. "I think maybe you remind me of what I used to want for myself. A place, a purpose, a reason to stop drifting. And I think maybe, if I help you build your dream, I might figure out how to start dreaming again myself." Olivia's throat felt tight. She wanted to tell him that he already mattered, that the past weeks had been better because he was in them, that she was starting to feel things she had not expected to feel. But the words felt too big, too vulnerable, so instead she reached out and took his hand. "I am glad you came back," she said quietly. He squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "So am I." They stayed like that for a long moment, hands linked, the fire crackling between them, and something shifted. Something that had been building since Abilene, since the horse market, since the first moment he had smiled at her from the fence rail and offered to help. It was not quite love, not yet, but it was the beginning of it, the first fragile roots taking hold. The work of building a homestead was harder than Olivia had imagined. They started at dawn and worked until dusk, every day for weeks. Yates felled trees in the cottonwood grove and milled them into rough lumber. Olivia cleared the building site and dug the foundation trench, her hands blistering and then hardening. They worked side by side, measuring and sawing and hammering, slowly raising the frame of the house. It was unglamorous work, tedious and exhausting and sometimes frustrating. The house went up one board at a time, progress measured in inches rather than feet. Yates taught Olivia how to notch logs properly, how to seal gaps with mud and grass, how to hang a door so it would not stick. She taught him how to keep track of supplies, how to plan meals with their limited stores, how to organize their work so they were not constantly doubling back. They bickered sometimes. usually when they were tired and hot, and one of them made a mistake. Olivia snapped at Yates when he cut a board too short. Yates grumbled at Olivia when she insisted on redoing a wall section that was not quite level. But the arguments never lasted long, and they always ended with an apology and a rueful laugh. "We are a mess," Olivia said one evening, sitting on the half-finished porch and surveying their work. Her dress was filthy, her hair falling out of its braid, her arms aching from a day of lifting beams. "We are," Yates agreed. He was equally dirty, sawdust in his hair and sweat staining his shirt. "But we are making progress. Look at that frame. In another 2 weeks we will have walls. 2 weeks after that, a roof. You are going to have a house, Olivia. We are going to have a house." She said it without thinking, then caught herself. "I mean, while you are here, it is your house too. I appreciate that." He stretched out his legs, leaning back on his hands. "You know, this is the longest I have stayed in one place in 6 years. Is it strange? A little, but also good. I forgot what it feels like to watch something grow, day by day. To know that the work you did yesterday is still there today, that it is building into something permanent. Do you miss drifting? Sometimes. When the work gets hard or the sun is too hot, I think about how easy it would be to just ride away, find a cattle drive or a ranch job where someone else makes all the decisions. But then I remember why I am here and the feeling passes." He glanced at her. "What about you? Do you ever regret taking on the claim?" "No, not even on the hard days. This is what I wanted, what my aunt wanted, and every board we nailed down is proof that it was worth it." The house took shape slowly but surely. By the end of the 3rd week, they had walls and a roof frame. By the end of the 4th week, the roof was shingled and the windows were installed, real glass panes that caught the light and made the interior feel spacious and bright. Olivia stood inside her new house, looking out at the prairie through the windows, and felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "It is beautiful," she said. Yates came to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "It is. You should be proud. We should be proud. You built this as much as I did. Maybe. But it is your dream. I am just happy I could help make it real." They finished the interior work over the next 2 weeks, building a simple table and chairs, installing the cast iron stove, constructing a loft where Olivia could sleep. Yates built himself a small bunk in what would eventually be a storage room, insisting he did not need much space. They dug a well and struck water at 20 feet, cold and clear and plentiful. They planted a garden and fenced a pasture for the goats and chickens. By the time the 60 days were up, the house was livable and the claim was officially established. Olivia rode back into Hayes to file the residency paperwork, and the clerk congratulated her on moving so quickly. "Most homesteaders took months to get settled," he said. She was ahead of schedule. That night, back at the claim, they celebrated with a proper dinner. Yates had shot a turkey, and Olivia roasted it with wild onions and herbs she had found growing near the creek. They ate at their new table in their new house, and it felt like the culmination of everything they had worked for. "To successful homesteading," Yates said, raising his tin cup of water in a toast. "To successful homesteading," Olivia echoed, clinking her cup against his. They talked late into the night, the lantern casting warm light through the house. Olivia felt happier than she had in years, maybe ever. She had a home, a future, and a partner who had proven himself steady and kind, and willing to work for something that mattered. She did not want to think about what would happen when Yates decided to move on. So she pushed the thought away and focused on the present, on the good food and the good company and the satisfaction of a job well done. But later, as she lay in the loft and listened to the sounds of Yates moving around below, she could not stop herself from wondering. How long would he stay? And what would she do when he left? The answer came 2 days later in a way she had not expected. They were working on building a chicken coop, Yates measuring boards while Olivia held them steady, when he suddenly set down his tools and looked at her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. What are your plans for this place? Long term, I mean. You have got 5 years to prove up the claim. What happens after that?" Olivia frowned, uncertain where he was going. "I suppose I keep working it. Build a bigger house maybe, or expand the garden, try to make a living off the land. By yourself? I do not know. I have not thought that far ahead. You should." Yates set down the board he was holding and faced her fully. "Because this is a lot of work for one person, Olivia, and if you want the homestead to thrive, you are going to need help. I know. I thought I would hire hands eventually, or maybe find other homesteaders nearby who would want to trade labor. That is one option." He took a breath. "Or you could have a partner, someone permanent who has as much stake in the place as you do." Olivia's heart started to beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I do not want to drift anymore. I have spent the last 2 months building this place with you, and it feels more like home than anywhere I have been since I lost my family's ranch. And I think, if you are willing, I would like to stay. Not as a hired hand, but as a partner, someone who shares the work and the decisions and the future." "Yates." Olivia's voice shook. "Are you asking to stay permanently? I am asking if you would consider it. I know it is a big thing, and I know we have only known each other a few months, but I think we work well together. I think we could build something good here, something that lasts." He hesitated. "And I think maybe there is more between us than just partnership. Or there could be, if you feel the same way." Olivia stared at him, her mind racing. She had been so careful not to let herself hope for this, not to imagine that Yates might want to stay, that what she felt for him might be mutual. But here he was, standing in front of her with his heart in his eyes, offering exactly what she had been too afraid to want. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "I have for a while now. I just did not think you would want to stay. I did not either at first. But somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of this as your dream and started thinking of it as ours. And I realized I do not want to walk away from that. I do not want to walk away from you." He stepped closer, reaching out to take her hands. His palms were calloused from work, warm and steady, and Olivia felt something in her chest crack open, all the fear and loneliness and doubt she had been carrying for months spilling out and leaving room for something better. "So what do you say?" Yates asked. "Can I stay?" "Yes." The word came out fierce and certain. "Yes, you can stay. I want you to stay." His grin was like the sun coming out. He pulled her into a hug, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his hands framed her face, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. "I am not going anywhere," he said softly. "I promise." "Good, because I think I might love you, Yates Parker. You think, or you know." "I know." She smiled up at him. "I definitely know." He kissed her then, gentle and sure, and it felt like the best kind of homecoming. Olivia kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the gratitude and joy and hope for the future. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "So," Yates said, still holding her close. "Partners then, in everything." "In everything," Olivia agreed. They finished the chicken coop that afternoon, working with a new ease, the air between them lighter and brighter. That evening they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the prairie, Yates's arm around Olivia's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. The house stood solid behind them, the garden stretched green and growing to the south, and the future felt wide open and full of promise. Over the following months, the homestead took on the rhythm of a real working farm. Yates and Olivia divided the labor based on their strengths, Yates handling the heavy construction and animal husbandry, while Olivia managed the garden and the household supplies. They worked together on the big projects, building a barn, expanding the pasture, clearing and planting 10 acres for crops as required by the Homestead Act. They also grew closer, the partnership deepening into something richer and more complex. Yates was steady in a way Olivia had not expected, patient and thoughtful, quick to laugh and slow to anger. He sang while he worked, terrible off-key songs that made her giggle, and he left her little gifts, carved wooden figures that accumulated on the windowsill. A horse, a bird, a tiny house that looked like theirs. Olivia discovered that she liked the rhythm of shared life, the way they moved around each other in the small house, the evening conversations that stretched long into the night. She liked the way Yates listened when she talked about her aunt, her childhood, her hopes for the homestead. She liked the way he challenged her ideas and made her think, the way he respected her opinions even when he disagreed. They argued sometimes, usually about practical things like whether to invest in more livestock or save the money for a rainy day. But the arguments were never mean, and they always ended with compromise. Olivia learned that Yates would give in on almost anything except safety, that he was fiercely protective without being controlling. Yates learned that Olivia was more stubborn than she looked, that when she set her mind to something she would not be swayed, and that the best approach was to present good reasons rather than demands. By autumn, the homestead was thriving. The garden had produced more vegetables than they could eat, and Olivia spent long days canning and preserving for the winter. The 10 acres of wheat had grown tall and golden, and they harvested it together, working from dawn to dusk in the September heat. The barn was finished, sturdy and spacious, with room for the growing herd of goats and the chickens that now numbered over 20. One evening in late October, as the first frost glittered on the grass, Yates sat Olivia down at the table and took her hands. "I have been thinking," he said. "We have been partners for 6 months now, and it has been the best 6 months of my life. But I want to make it official. I want us to be married, Olivia. I want your homestead to be our homestead, your future to be our future. What do you say?" Olivia's heart swelled. She had been expecting this, hoping for it, but the reality of it still took her breath away. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." They rode into Hayes the next week and stood before a justice of the peace in the small courthouse. There were no guests, no fancy clothes, no flowers. Just Olivia in her best dress and Yates in a clean shirt, exchanging vows in a plain room with a clerk and the justice as witnesses. But it was perfect, Olivia thought. Simple and true, like everything between them. When the justice pronounced them married, Yates kissed her like he was sealing a promise, and Olivia felt the last piece of her life click into place. She had a home, a partner, a future. Everything her aunt had dreamed of, everything she had worked for was real. They celebrated that night at the hotel in Hayes, a rare extravagance. Yates ordered steak and champagne, and they toasted to their marriage, to the homestead, to all the years ahead. Olivia felt giddy with happiness, half drunk on champagne and wholly drunk on love. "I cannot believe this is my life," she said, leaning against Yates's shoulder. 6 months ago I was alone and scared and convinced I was going to lose the claim, and now look at us. "Now look at us," Yates agreed. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "We built something good, Olivia. And we are going to keep building. Whatever comes next, we will face it together." The first winter on the homestead was hard but manageable. Yates had insisted they stock up on supplies, and they had enough food and fuel to last until spring. The house stayed warm with the cast iron stove, and the animals weathered the cold in the barn. Yates and Olivia spent the long winter evenings reading aloud to each other, playing cards and planning the next year's projects. They added a second room to the house that spring, anticipating the future. By summer, Olivia was pregnant, and the knowledge filled them both with a joy that was almost overwhelming. Yates became even more protective, insisting she rest while he handled the heavy work, but Olivia refused to be coddled. She worked the garden and managed the household and helped with the harvest, and by the time the baby was due in late autumn, the homestead was more prosperous than ever. Their son was born on a cold November night, healthy and loud and perfect. They named him Oliver, and Yates held him with a tenderness that made Olivia's heart ache. This was the family he had lost, she realized, rebuilding itself in a new form. This was the dream he had given up on, coming true after all. Oliver was barely a year old when Olivia discovered she was pregnant again, this time with twins. The pregnancy was harder than the first, and the birth even more so, but when the midwife from Hayes finally placed two tiny girls in Olivia's arms, the struggle felt worth it. They named the girls Josiah and Lark, and Yates joked that they had gone from a quiet house to utter chaos in less than 3 years. "I would not change it for the world," he said, rocking Lark while Olivia nursed Josiah. Oliver toddled around the room, chattering to himself, and the house felt full in the best possible way. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and louder but rich with love. The children grew, and so did the homestead. Yates expanded the pasture and built a larger barn. Olivia planted an orchard, apple and pear trees that would not bear fruit for years, but would be a legacy for their children. They hired help during the busy seasons, local men who appreciated steady work and fair pay, and the homestead became known in the area as a model of what could be achieved with determination and partnership. Neighbors came and went, other homesteaders proving up their claims or giving up and moving on. Yates and Olivia helped where they could, sharing advice and labor and sometimes supplies. They became respected members of the small community that was growing up along the Smoky Hill Road, known for their generosity and their thriving farm. Oliver grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the animals and could already ride better than most adults. Josiah and Lark were inseparable, two halves of a whole, one quiet and one loud but both sharp as tacks. When they were 4, Olivia gave birth to another daughter, tiny and dark-haired, and they named her Verena. Yates declared the house officially too small, and they spent the next summer building an addition, more bedrooms and a proper sitting room. The years passed in a blur of work and love, and the small triumphs of building a life. The homestead thrived, the children grew, and Yates and Olivia grew with them, their partnership deepening into something unshakable. They still bickered sometimes, still had hard days when the work felt endless and the weather uncooperative. But they faced it together, the way they had always faced things, and that made all the difference. One evening, when the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, Yates and Olivia sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. It was autumn again, the air crisp and cool, the prairie grass turning golden. Olivia leaned against Yates's shoulder, his arm around her, and felt a deep contentment settle over her. "You ever think about that day in Abilene?" she asked. "Sometimes." "Why?" "I was just thinking how different my life would be if you had not helped me with Walter Finch, if you had not followed me north, if you had not stayed to build the house. I would have made it work somehow, I suppose, but it would have been so much harder and so much lonelier." "I think about it too," Yates said quietly. "I think about how close I came to just drifting away, convincing myself that helping you was enough and I did not need anything more. I am glad I turned around. I am glad I stayed." So am I. Olivia tilted her head to look up at him. Do you ever regret it? Giving up the drifting life, settling down here? Not even for a second. This is everything I wanted, Olivia. Everything I thought I had lost. You gave that back to me. The homestead, the family, the sense of belonging somewhere. I will never be able to thank you enough for that. You do not need to thank me. You earned this as much as I did. More, maybe. You stayed through the hard parts. You worked when you did not have to. You loved me when I was stubborn and difficult. This is your homestead as much as mine, Yates. Our homestead. He kissed her, slow and sweet, and they sat there on the porch they had built together, looking out at the land they had claimed and worked and made into something real. Inside, the children slept safe and warm. In the barn, the animals were settled for the night. The garden lay ready for winter, the fields harvested, the wood chopped and stacked. It was not a fancy life, not an easy one, but it was theirs, built from nothing but determination and partnership and love. And as Olivia sat there with Yates's arm around her and the stars wheeling overhead, she thought about her aunt and hoped that somehow, wherever she was, she could see what they had made. She hoped her aunt knew that the dream had come true, not exactly as planned but better, because it was shared. The Mayor Walter Finch had sold Olivia that day, and Abilene was long gone, bought back and vanished into whatever schemes Finch had moved on to. But the memory of that transaction and the cowboy who had made it right had changed everything. Had built a homestead, a family, a future. Olivia pressed closer to Yates, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, and smiled into the darkness. They had come so far from that dusty market in Abilene, from the lame horse and the swindler and the impossible deadline. They had traveled 200 miles and 17 days, and countless moments of doubt and fear and determination, and they had arrived exactly where they were meant to be. The homestead continued to grow over the years that followed. By the time Oliver was 10, he was already helping with the major farm work, his serious nature making him a reliable hand. Josiah and Lark, now 7, were in charge of the chickens and helped their mother in the garden, though they were more interested in riding horses than in domestic chores. Verena, at 3, was the baby who would not stay a baby, already following her siblings everywhere and demanding to help with everything. Yates and Olivia had long since proved up the claim, meeting all the requirements and receiving the full deed to their 200 acres. They had expanded slightly, purchasing an adjacent 40 acres when the neighbor decided to move back east, and the homestead now felt less like a gamble and more like a permanent, prosperous reality. The house had been expanded twice, and there was talk of building a proper second story. The barn was large and well-maintained, housing not just goats and chickens now, but also a small herd of cattle and several horses. The orchard Olivia had planted was finally bearing fruit, and she spent every autumn making preserves and cider that they sold in Hayes. Yates had become known for his skill with horses, and neighbors often brought animals to him for training or healing. They had built a life that felt solid and good, full of hard work, but also full of love and laughter, and the satisfaction of seeing their efforts bear fruit. The children were healthy and happy, and Yates and Olivia had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long partnership, still laughing together, still working side by side, still choosing each other every single day. One summer afternoon, when the work was done and the children were playing by the creek, Yates found Olivia sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, her face tilted toward the sun. "You look content," he said, settling beside her. "I am. Are you?" "More than I ever thought I would be." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Do you remember that first night we camped on the claim, when we were planning where to build the house?" "Of course. We stayed up half the night talking about what we wanted to create here. I remember thinking that night that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found something worth staying for. I was not sure yet, but I was hoping. And now, sitting here with you, with our children playing down by the creek, in the house we built together, I know I made the right choice. I know I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Olivia squeezed his hand. So am I. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that we built all of this from nothing but a lame horse and a swindler and your crazy plan to make him buy it back. Yates laughed. That was a good plan. One of my better ideas, I think. It was the idea that changed everything. Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for that, Yates, for helping me, for staying, for building this life with me. I could not have done any of it without you. Yes, you could have. But I am awfully glad you did not have to. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I love you, Olivia Parker. Have I told you that today? Not in the last few hours. I was starting to worry. Well, I love you, more every day, which I did not think was possible but apparently is. I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Good scary or bad scary? Good scary. The kind that reminds me how lucky I am, how much I have to lose, but also how much I have to protect and cherish and be grateful for. They sat together in the sunshine, the sounds of their children's laughter drifting up from the creek, the prairie stretching golden and endless around them. Olivia thought about how far she had come from that frightened young woman in the Abilene horse market, desperate and alone, and convinced she was going to fail. She had been so focused on the deadline, on the fear of losing the claim, that she had almost missed the real gift. Not the land, but the partnership. Not the house, but the home. Yates had been right when he said she would have figured it out on her own. But having someone to share it with, someone who worked beside her and believed in the dream as much as she did, had made everything better. Richer, more meaningful. What are you thinking about? Yates asked. How lucky I am, how grateful. How this is so much better than anything I imagined when I first filed the claim. Better than you imagined, huh? I will take that as a compliment. You should. You are a pretty big part of what makes it better. Just pretty big, not huge, not the most important part. Olivia laughed. Do not fish for compliments, Yates Parker. You know exactly how important you are. I do. But I like hearing you say it anyway. She turned to kiss him, warm and lingering, and felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. Some things never changed, she thought. Some things just got better with time. The children came running up from the creek eventually, hungry and muddy and full of stories about the frogs they had caught and released. Olivia herded them inside to wash up while Yates started dinner, and the house filled with the comfortable chaos of family life. They ate together at the big table, the one Yates had built that first summer, and talked about their day, their plans, their dreams. Oliver wanted to raise horses when he grew up. Josiah wanted to be a doctor. Lark wanted to travel and see the ocean. Verena wanted to be just like her mother, which made Olivia's heart squeeze with love and pride. Yates listened to each of them with genuine interest, asking questions and offering encouragement, and Olivia watched him with affection. He was a good father, patient and kind and present in a way her own father had never been. After dinner, they sat on the porch again, the children playing in the yard, and Olivia felt that deep contentment settle over her again. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the quiet accumulation of good days, shared work, and love that deepened with time. You ever wonder what Walter Finch is doing now? Yates asked suddenly. Olivia laughed. That is random. Why would I think about Walter Finch? I do not know. I was just thinking that he probably has no idea what he set in motion when he sold you that lame horse. If he had been honest, If he had not tried to cheat you, we might never have met. I might still be drifting, and you might be working this place alone. In a weird way, we should probably thank him. I am not thanking Walter Finch for anything. He is a cheat and a liar, true, but he is a cheat and a liar who inadvertently brought us together. That has to count for something. Olivia considered this. I suppose in the strangest possible way you are right, but I still would not thank him. Fair enough. I will send him a mental thank you and leave it at that. They watched the sunset together, the sky turning pink and orange and purple, the prairie glowing in the last light. The children eventually tired and came inside, and Yates and Olivia tucked them into bed, reading stories and singing lullabies, until one by one they drifted off to sleep. In their own room, in the big bed Yates had built from cottonwood lumber, they lay together in the darkness and talked about the future. About expanding the herd, about sending Oliver to school in Hayes if he wanted to go, about maybe taking a trip as a family once the younger children were a bit older, about all the ordinary, extraordinary possibilities that came with building a life together. I hope you know how happy you make me, Olivia said quietly. I do, because you make me just as happy. Good. Let us keep doing that then, making each other happy. Deal. They fell asleep tangled together, the way they always did, and outside the house they had built together the prairie stretched dark and peaceful, the stars wheeling overhead, the wind whispering through the grass. The homestead was quiet, settled, safe. Everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of was real. And in the barn, if anyone had been awake to see it, a very old mare stood in a comfortable stall, her coat gray with age, her left foreleg no longer lame. The mare Walter Finch had sold to Olivia all those years ago, the one Yates had made him buy back, had found her way to the homestead a year after they were married. Yates had spotted her in a sale yard in Hayes, still favoring that leg, still gentle-eyed and patient. He had bought her for almost nothing, brought her home, and spent months nursing her back to soundness. The mare had never been a working horse after that, too old and too scarred by her early mistreatment. But she had become a beloved member of the homestead anyway, the children's favorite, the horse they learned to ride on because she was patient and kind and would never hurt them. Olivia had named her Hope, because that was what she represented. The idea that even broken things could be healed, that even the worst beginnings could lead to happy endings. Hope dozed in her stall, warm and well-fed and loved, and if horses could understand gratitude, she would have been grateful. She had started as a symbol of everything that could go wrong, a lame horse sold by a swindler to a desperate woman. But she had become something else, a reminder of the cowboy who had made things right, the partnership that had grown from that moment, and the family that had bloomed from determination and love. The years continued to pass in that gentle, relentless way time has. Oliver grew tall and serious, his love for horses leading him to work alongside his father. By the time he was 15, he was training horses for neighbors and earning his own money, saving it carefully for the future. Josiah discovered she had a gift for healing, both animals and people, and talked constantly about going to medical school. A dream Yates and Olivia supported even though it meant she would leave the homestead someday. Lark remained adventurous, always pushing boundaries and exploring the prairie, her curiosity boundless. Verena grew into a capable, kind young girl who helped her mother with everything and dreamed of having a homestead of her own someday. The homestead prospered. Yates and Olivia worked side by side through droughts and good years, through illnesses and celebrations, through all the ordinary challenges of building a life on the prairie. They added more land when opportunities arose, helped neighbors in need, and became elders in the growing community. People came to them for advice, for help settling disputes, for the kind of steady wisdom that came from years of working the land and building something lasting. Their marriage deepened into something unshakable, the kind of partnership that needed few words because they understood each other so completely. They still laughed together, still bickered over small things, still chose each other every single day. Olivia looked at Yates across the dinner table and felt the same flutter of love she had felt that first night by the campfire. Yates watched Olivia work in her garden and marveled that he had been lucky enough to find her, to build this life with her. On their 20th anniversary, they stood on the porch of the house they had built together and looked out at the land they had claimed and worked and made into home. Oliver was courting a girl from town. Josiah had been accepted to a women's medical college back east. Lark was planning a trip to Denver with a group of young people from the area. Verena was thriving in the local school, the teacher saying she was one of the brightest students she had ever taught. 20 years, Olivia said, shaking her head in wonder. It does not seem possible. It does not. But here we are. Yates took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after all these years. Do you ever regret it? Leaving St. Louis, claiming this land, marrying a drifting cowboy? Not even for a second. This is the life I was meant to live, Yates. And you are the person I was meant to live it with. I feel the same way. You saved me, you know. From drifting, from never belonging anywhere, from giving up on the idea that I could have something good and lasting. You gave me a home and a purpose and a family. I will never be able to repay that. You do not need to repay it. You gave me the same things. We saved each other, I think. They kissed in the evening light, 20 years of love and partnership in that single gesture, and from inside the house, they heard their children's laughter, the sounds of life continuing. The homestead stretched around them, 240 acres of good land, well worked and well loved. The house stood solid and strong, expanded and improved over the years, but still fundamentally the same structure they had built that first summer. The barn, the orchard, the garden, all of it thriving. And in the barn, Hope the old mare finally passed away in her sleep one peaceful autumn night, surrounded by the family that had loved her. They buried her under the cottonwoods by the creek, and Oliver carved a marker. Hope, the horse that brought us together. It was not quite accurate, but it was true in spirit. Without that lame horse, without Walter Finch's scheme and Yates's intervention, none of this would exist. Life continued in its relentless, beautiful way. Josiah went off to medical school and came back a doctor, setting up a practice in Hayes but visiting the homestead often. Oliver married his sweetheart and brought her to live at the homestead, building a second house on the property for his own family. Lark traveled and sent letters from Denver and San Francisco and eventually settled in a small town in Colorado, happy and adventurous as ever. Verena grew up and fell in love with a young farmer from a neighboring homestead, and when she married, Yates and Olivia helped the young couple establish their own claim nearby. Grandchildren arrived, filling the homestead with new laughter and new life. Yates and Olivia slowed down, handing more of the work to Oliver and his wife, but they never stopped working entirely. The land was in their blood now, the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of growing things and raising animals and building something that would last beyond their own lives. On a warm summer evening many years later, Yates and Olivia sat on the porch of the house they had built together. They were older now, gray-haired and worn by years of work, but still strong, still together, still choosing each other every single day. Their grandchildren played in the yard, Oliver's children and Verena's children, a whole new generation growing up on the homestead. "We did it," Olivia said quietly. "We built something that lasted, We did. Yates squeezed her hand. Your aunt would be proud, I think. I think so too. This is everything she dreamed of and more. Olivia leaned her head on Yates's shoulder, comfortable and content. Thank you for staying all those years ago. Thank you for building this with me. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for seeing past the drifting cowboy to the man who wanted to belong somewhere. You gave me that, Olivia. You gave me everything. They sat together as the sun set, surrounded by the family they had created and the land they had claimed and worked and loved. The homestead stretched around them, solid and thriving, a testament to what could be built with determination and partnership and love. It had started with a lame horse and a swindler and a cowboy with a clever tongue and a kind heart. It had grown into something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every mile and every moment of doubt and every ounce of effort. As darkness fell and the stars came out, Yates and Olivia went inside together, hand in hand, still partners after all these years, still building their life one day at a time. The house was full of warmth and light, and the sounds of family, and outside the prairie stretched endless and peaceful under the night sky. They had built something good, something that would outlast them, something that proved the best things in life were not given but earned, not found but created. And it had all started with a lame horse in a dusty market, a swindler with too many teeth in his smile, and a cowboy who decided to make things right. It was a good story, Olivia thought as she drifted off to sleep that night, Yates's arms around her, their grandchildren sleeping in the rooms they had added over the years. A love story, a homestead story, a story about building something from nothing and making it last. The kind of story that mattered, the kind that would be told to those grandchildren someday, a family legend about how it all began. And somewhere, perhaps, Walter Finch was still selling horses and running his schemes, never knowing that his worst transaction had led to the best life two people could have asked for. It was fitting, Olivia thought. Justice came in strange forms sometimes, and theirs had come in the form of a partnership that turned into love, a homestead that turned into a legacy, and a lame horse that had been healed and loved and buried under the cottonwoods with honor. The story had ended, but the life continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation Yates and Olivia had laid all those years ago when they were young and scared and determined to make something of themselves. It was a good ending, Olivia thought. No, better than good. It was perfect. It was home. It was everything they had ever dreamed of, and more than they had ever hoped for. And it would last, long after they were gone, a testament to what could be built with love and determination, and the simple choice to stay when it would have been easier to drift away. It was their legacy, their gift to the future. And as Olivia closed her eyes for the last time on that peaceful summer night, surrounded by family and the land she had claimed and made her own, she knew without doubt that it had all been worth it. Every mile, every struggle, every moment of fear and hope and love. It had all been worth it, and she would not change a single thing.